staff and officers, these young kids who are in front of the podium today, the young kids who are going back to college, and the parents of these kids, friends, visitors, my wife, my family, my fellow Livingstonians, and a couple of people I haven't seen in a long time. A special recognition to you. I won't call your name, Bob and Laverne. But I'm glad that you're here. I want to thank our sister, dear sister, for that introduction. I usually don't tell folks when I work for the government, folks would say, well, send us a bio or resume. My response was, I'm just a good old country boy trying to be a good servant. Because in the federal government, sometimes we control large grant monies and we thought we had ownership of those monies. We forgot that we were a public servant. And that attribute still follows me today. And I thank Evelyn for inviting me, facilitating this opportunity to speak. I relish the opportunity, particularly to speak to young folks and to parents of young folks. And I stopped by today to tell you that our kids are facing a crisis. They're facing a crisis. They're facing a very dismal economy, and it may not get any better anytime soon. I was going to say something about the good news and bad news. The good news is that crisis. The bad news is the crisis. The good news is that you're anchored in the Lord, you have faith, and that will carry you through. But we all have responsibilities. Parents have responsibilities, the community has responsibilities, and the church has responsibilities. We need to restore that concept of the value of the village. It's something that we talk about, but we talk about a lot of things, and some of them just don't get done. But I came by today to talk about this crisis and the fact that we need to do something about it. Now, I'm watching the clock, so I'm going to be obedient. I do have a tendency to get carried away, and sometimes saying absolutely nothing. But today I'm going to keep my remarks on point, and I'm going to talk about the importance of preparing your kids to utilize the 4-year college experience. There's some question as to whether or not that's possible now, because kids are unprepared for the most part, and schools are preparing them. So pray with me, and I will share my thoughts with you for the next few minutes. Precious Father God, fill me with your Holy Spirit and your insight, and let me find in all the words that I have scribbled on these stages a message that is crystal clear, a message that will pierce the heart of some parent or some kid, that sometimes in the future will allow them to reach their full potential. I ask this in the precious name of Christ the prophet and the Savior. Amen. We have to talk about this problem. We can't be like that bird that kept his mouth closed and ended up on a platter. You know about that bird. I know some of you know about that bird. But this was a bird, an exotic bird that a young son had given his mother. He was traveling in South America, and he saw this lovely exotic bird, and he gave it to her. He came home for Thanksgiving and asked her about the bird, and she said, oh yeah, this is one of the birds. We enjoyed him. He tasted good. We had him for Thanksgiving. And the son said, Mom, that was a very expensive bird. It cost $7,000, and it could speak 7 different languages. And she said, well, he should have said something. So I'm here to say something about this problem. I had initially focused pretty much around the college kids, but I think it's appropriate also for the young kids between PK and 12 who are planning to go to college, and hopefully parents aren't planting to see in them the importance of college. College is important. It's certainly valuable in this particular environment that we're living in. And imagine, if you will, I'm going to set this visual kind of scene to connect with you. Imagine, if you will, this U-Haul traveling down a highway And at the end of the highway, there's a sign that says, college straight ahead. And behind it is a Brinks truck. And I think that implication is clear. And I like that slide for a couple of reasons. One, it had artistic integrity. I took a high school art class and I learned that everything up in front of the picture should be large and those behind it should be small. But by the same token, as I said, Pastor, it's obvious that that brick truck speaks to the astronomical cost of college. And it also speaks to the obligation of kids to maximize the 4-year college experience for a number of reasons. Parents are spending extraordinary amounts of money. They're making extraordinary sacrifices to send their sons and daughters to school because they believe that the schoolhouse door is still the gateway to a future. Now, unfortunately, some of our kids misbehave and they don't take the responsibility for being the best that they can be. Recently, well, I shouldn't say recently, every month now there are reports coming out of educational conferences, coming out of boardrooms from business leaders, talking about the fact that our kids are unprepared to meet the demand, the 21st century demand of this digital economic society, which means that they're going to have difficulty competing in the world. They're just not competing locally. Because there is a weak application pool now, companies here and elsewhere are casting their net far and long into the different corners of the globe, trying to get the best and the brightest. And if your son or your daughter is not among them, they might be a resident in your basement or the upstairs room for quite a while. Now, if you want that, that's all right. But we don't have to have that. There are some things that we can do to make this happen. I like the idea, the slide that shows this U-Haul going off to college, because it's symbolic of that moment that parents wait for, to get that kid, that son or that daughter through high school and get him to college. But in terms of preparing, you need to prepare kids for, in preparing kids for the college life, you need to take a close look at that U-Haul. What's in that U-Haul? Because what's in that U-Haul might get in the way of a good education. You know, so you need, that's a part of a parent's responsibility in terms of getting kids to realize the importance of college and preparing themselves to take full advantage of the 4 years that they're there. Now, what I want to do is to, I'm not going to be long, I have 3 questions that I'm going to ask and answer, because as I said, the fact of the matter is, I really struggled trying to pull this message together. I guess it's almost insulting for me to tell you how long I've been working on this. I got a real early start. I met with the pastor and this told us, I don't know, June maybe, and I had started writing before then. Had a chance to talk to my friend Barbara about a month or more ago. She said, "What are you doing? Am I disturbing you?" I said, "No, I'm just getting some notes together for the speaking engagement at County." She saw me at Livingstone College at a meeting a couple of days ago, and Jen said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm trying to get my notes together." You know, and I think it was, and I asked myself last night about 2 o'clock, what is the matter with you? Why, you can articulate, you can read, you can write, you can think, you have a broad imagination. Why can't you get this message together? And I think sometimes, one, I don't often use outlines, so that was started. And then sometimes, you know, you really have to wait on the Lord.
Yes, yes.
So about 2 o'clock this morning, and I said, "Lord, I'm going to bed." I hope you give me something, because right now, I got a bunch of nothing. So I just came up with these 3 questions. I wanted to be brief. I wanted to be obedient to instructions from the pastor. So, that's not unusual, is it? I like to think everybody is. As I said, I had 3 questions, and I'm all dealing with maximizing the college experience. Now, for these young kids here, that's not something that's distant from them. They have a jump on the kids who are already in college and have a different kind of a learning model. And let me stop here, because these reports that talk about kids being unprepared and being complacent, disillusioned, I can understand why they're disillusioned. I've been disillusioned in a lot of my classes for a very long time. Undergraduate, graduate, doctoral, because as business leaders are saying, the colleges and universities aren't training people to do the kind of jobs that they need to be done. Mobil Oil recently, a couple of years ago, were hiring PhDs. And when they got them, they were saying, they're not what we want. So they were spending more money training them, $3 billion a year to train them. So what they said was, we may as well start our own PhD program. And a lot of schools, a lot of companies are doing this now. They're training folk because they want the best and the brightest, and schools aren't doing it. So in fairness to these kids who are being accused of being unprepared and disillusioned, the fact of the matter is, and now when you parents prepare to send your kids to school, because the idea is you want them to walk through that door, have a bright future, have a good life, and increase their earning potential and get that job. Well, I got a flash for you. Most colleges aren't in the business of creating jobs for kids. They're not. That's not their thing, you know. So you need to really prepare these kids and have a vision, a goal of what they want to do when they get to college, because kids are going to pretty much use what I did, and I can't speak for my colleagues, but I think they did pretty much the same thing except for a few bright stars. And I had the old learning model. Get good grades, get that degree, take off your cap and gown, get your resume, and set it upon the page and look for that job. I did that with a nice 2.98 average, which wasn't bad. Maybe it was. But coming from high school with a 1.6 average and told you never amount to anything, I think that's pretty good. And the first job I went to, I had that resume and I showed it to this individual. Had my diploma. And I told him, Larry, that I'm a sociologist. He said, son, you're not a sociologist. You got an undergraduate degree in sociology, you don't have anything. I do have a job for you, and I looked and I'll give you $5,800 a year. It was in 1966. And I looked and I said, well, you got a high school, I see your schedule in a high school graduate, makes $54,000 a year. What's the difference? He said, actually, there's no difference. You're not as qualified as he is. He has a couple of years experience, you know, which was shocking to me. And I learned that just getting grades enough to get that degree, that illusion that the degree is the golden ticket, it ain't the golden ticket, folks. You gotta have something else with it. I'm gonna talk about some of that. So parents, you know, your kids aren't in college now, prepare them, let them know that they need to go there with a particular goal around building a career and creating a job. And they can make use of college, not just going, you gotta go to class, you gotta get your academics together and pursue academic excellence. But that is just a part of it. I don't know if I have time to go through some of that, but I'll try to get to it. Back to my 3 questions, because I could have forgotten all about it in someplace else. Why should students better utilize their 4-year experience? What is the role of parents in helping their kids to better utilize their 4 years experience? And what can students do to utilize their experience? But there's several reasons I lay out in terms of kids utilizing their first year, their college experience, because again, we have these brutal realities facing them. And they need college a good college degree to put them in a place, hopefully give them an advantage to get that job. Now I said that a degree is not a golden ticket to a job, but a person with a degree have a better chance of getting a job than someone without a degree. We are living now in a technologically affluent society. These kids now are, like I said, competing in a global market. And they have to prepare themselves and equip themselves for an information-driven, technology-based society and the ability to manage complex data and information. Now, for many of them, they're pretty much doing some of that now with all the equipment they're walking around with, all of the phones and whatnot. They are really in advantage. They can take advantage of that, and they should take advantage of that. Another reason why folks need to really think about how they maximize that college experience because they need to think about how they're going to approach learning. As I said, that old learning model of getting good grades just won't work anymore. Kids have to see college as more than classrooms and chalkboard. I'm reminded of a little story, not a funny story, but a story nevertheless, of these kids, freshman science class. The kids walked into class every day, and the professor taught every day. On a blackboard was a diagram of body parts. Every day it was there. 60 days later, 90 days later, final exam. Kids walk in the room, they don't look at the blackboard, but that diagram is erased. And the professor gives them the test, one question. Name the parts of the body. What did the kids say? You didn't tell us that, you never taught that. And he said to them, college is not about what instructors are teaching you. What I feed you is not a full education. You've got to take advantage of what's happening around this college campus. So parents, teach your kids that. To go outside the walls of the classroom, outside the walls of the college, in the community. It's all learning experiences that they can use to equip themselves for this new world that they're going to face, a very harsh world. And last but not least, under this first question is, parents are paying a king's ransom to send their kids to college. And kids need to be responsible. They need to make sure that they protect that investment. They protect that investment by doing all the things that parents want. Get some good grades, but also create a career. And come out and be something. Now, the difficulty sometimes in kids doing this, college is a huge struggle. And I didn't realize it until years after I got out. And I don't think kids are prepared to go to college. Even if they go to college with a 4-point average, I don't think they're necessarily prepared to maximize those years. And I'm going to tell you why. A kid is in school for a full year. College is a full year as far as I'm concerned, excluding breaks, a full year. There are 1,469 days in a year, 141,024 hours. You've got to manage that. You've got to manage that time. That's time to you. Now, some of you have gone to workshops for a week, and if you're fortunate enough to go to one of the more sophisticated academies for 2 weeks, you have to learn something to bring back to work. 3 days for this supervisory learning of something. And you're saying, well, it might seem like a long time. 141,000 hours, 1,400 days. Now, 5 years, 29,000 days. Is that enough time to go and really make something out of yourself relative to a career or something? In fact, some universities are telling kids, not only apply for a job, but create a job, create a possibility for a job. But pastors are telling folks, see if you can start your own business. Boston University is doing a very few schools. So parents, give your kid a full vision and really, sort of set them free. I got to reach in my pocket and share with you. That's a story about this gentleman who was attending a conference, probably an educational conference, talking about the same thing we're talking about today. At least I think he was. In my story, that's what he did. And as he would jog in the morning before conference, and every morning he would jog, and he would see the same man fishing. And this man was fishing. Every time he catch a big fish, he'd throw it back into the water. When he caught a small fish, he would put it into his creel. That creel is that little bag, and Larry, you know about that little creel. You got one, you was fishing. Put it in that little bag. And the gentleman saw it. About the third or fourth day, he went over to the gentleman and said, I'm puzzled. I've been jogging for 2-3 days now, and every morning I see you fishing, and you're catching fish, you throw the large fish back, and you keep the small fish. What's the problem? And he reached into his creel and said, all I got is a little old frying pan. Well, we got to take and teach our kids not to take the little old frying pan attitude to college. That's what we got to do. Teach them that. And you know how to do that. If you don't know how to do it, invite me back and I'll tell you. I'm talking about the role of parents. And that's my next question. The role of parents. Parents are partners in this education process. Not only from, in my era, it was from first grade to high school. That's what my mother gave me. You work, you go to service, or you get out of my house. College was not in the equation. She put a value on education. Get a high school degree, because I don't have one. I was the first family in my family to get a high school. Not talking about my family, several generations of 3 or 4 families, and the first one to go to college. So after that point in time, she certainly enlarged her appreciation of college education, began to encourage her nephews and grandsons, etc. I was looking at something a couple of days ago on the internet. We talked about the value of college and what you're getting out of it. You look for that perfect fit. A lot of kids want to send a lot of parents want to send their kids to big schools and whatnot. Harvard, Yale. They're in the business too of making money. Or you want to go to John Hopkins. Check it out. I was reading a story about this young lady who went to Malone College in Northern Ohio. And I'm quite sure many of you haven't heard of that like I have. She was spending $50,000 a year tuition. And you would think, well, she wanted to be a special kind of doctor who was also a lawyer or something, but no, she just wanted to do educational counseling. And she was convinced that was the place to come. And now she's loaded with debt, like so many kids. I think now it's estimated that some 38% of all graduates have at least a $24,000 debt. The total outstanding debt from loans is $1 trillion. $1 trillion. Anybody know how much that is? You know how much that is? Too much. Let me give you some idea what that is. If you had $1 million, you could spend $1,000 a day for 3 years. If you had $1 billion, you could spend $1 million a day. $1 million a day for 3 years, 3.5 years. If you had $1 trillion, you could spend $1 billion, $1 billion a day for 3.5 years. That's a lot of money. But $24,000 is a lot of money, and sometimes $20 is a lot of money. So again, parents, you have a real responsibility in terms of helping your kids to understand and prepare for college now. You don't have to wait. I think one of the biggest problems is that some parents, I know there's a lot of competing priorities and whatnot, but you still have to make time to deal with your kids and to prepare them for education. You have to. In terms of what kids can do while they're in college, I know I'm getting close to my time. I have a nephew who was just starting in Livingstone College as a freshman. I saw him a few days ago. He's been there, and I gave him a plan of action. how to succeed in college and to make good of the 4 years. And I know my nephew tended to, I would have preferred for him to have gone to Northern Virginia Community College or something. That was not my city. I took him down to Livingstone College thinking he wouldn't like it because he wanted to go to West Virginia University, but he fell in love with it. I don't know why, because he hadn't taken any classes yet. And there were some beautiful girls there now. But anyway, as a Brian, you just have to be about business. So I created this plan, I sent it to him, and said, you got to stick with this. And I said, number one, when you go to college, if you want to succeed in college, you've got to plan. You've got to have some forethought to what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. You've got to do that. You've got to do that. And I talked about all of that time. College is a management experience. You've got a lot of time on your hands. And you've got this newfound freedom, out of reach of parental authority. That's challenging. You've got to manage those impulses. Because you know what they said about, opportunity knocks on the door and it's gone. Temptation just leans on the doorbell. That way you can smile. So you got to, and you can start now by teaching your kids how to manage time. There's a lot of time on that, but they got to manage that whole, that newfound freedom they have. They got peer relationships they got to have. They got to manage their classwork. They got to manage their study time. They got so much to manage, and we don't teach them that. So when people say, well, our kids are unprepared for college, what do we tell kids? No one told me anything when I went to college, just tried to get back to Thanksgiving. But I didn't have anyone to say to me what to do in college. And I'll tell you what, kids today, we talk about two-parent families, kids today don't get the same message. I spoke to a neighbor recently. He sent his daughter about 5 years ago now. She went to Morgan State University, had an excellent engineering program. She got an engineering degree. She graduated, put on her cap and gown, and ended up getting a job at a bank for $8.50 an hour. Well, I don't grudge anybody for making that, but if you go and spend that kind of money and get an engineering degree, something else supposed to happen. Well, she did just, I asked her father, what did you tell her? Well, I told her to go to school and get a degree. And that's what she did. She didn't take advantage of any of the internship. She focused on what that professor said about those kids in that science class. You got to look beyond the classroom. You got to look beyond. You got to investigate the community, partner with your faculty and whatnot. You got to have skills when you come out. You got to have skills, soft skills, particularly technical skills. Yes, and you do that given your chosen career pathway. But you have to have soft skills. You got to be able to plan, organize. You got to be able to manage and organize and classify difficult data, write different reports from that. You got to do critical thinking, and you got to read and write. Now, that's a problem with a lot of us. It's a problem with a lot of us. I've been had some, I worked for a couple of years at a college, I won't name it, and I was paid a little extra money if I would, I guess, serve as a reader and a support person for some kids who were working on their master's degree. They had to write a thesis. And they gave me $100 for every student. They gave me 3 students. After about 2 weeks, I told them they could keep that $100. Because it was too painful. It was too painful. So you can start your kids reading and writing now. Have them to keep a journal. Just a simple journal, what they do, maybe what they do in the summer. Have them read magazines. Go to the library. For kids who are in college already, make sure they join a trade organization. They go to conferences and whatnot. Read the story of Frederick Douglass. There is a slave, a young boy who learned to read and became a prolific writer when people were trying not to have him to read. And we got all freedom in the world now to read. But there are lots of things that we do. Reading is when they got to communicate and they got to write. My wife is a former school teacher. She's telling me now that kids can't even write cursory. If you write cursive, they will ask you, what is that? Now they're using the truncated version, IDK or MOG, oh my God. And before long, that might be a new language in 20 years from now. It might very well be. So that's something we need to do. Kids also need to understand faculty relationships and collaborate with their teachers. Sometimes I used to say this to all that teacher doesn't know anything, they don't know anything. Teachers do know something, they have contacts that can help you. So kids going to college, they should have a plan, they should have expectations, and they should share those expectations with their professors. That's a resource that kids don't want to use. They come in, they hear the lecture, they pass the test and run and never see the professor again. That's a major resource. That professor just didn't get there by some magic wand being waved. They know something, and we need to get that. Of course, you got to be committed to academics. Now, academics is important because an employer will look at academics to get some idea as to your understanding of the world and what's happening around you. So that's important. So you got to impress upon kids through their academics. I talked about communication skill. That's very critical. The value of collaboration. And number 7 in this thing, these are what I call there are 9 performance action areas that I tell kids, not a goal, but a performance action area that you got to do something about communication. You got to do something about internships. You got to have internships. And internships, community relations, build community relations. You can go out in the evening at a church and set up a tutorial class for some kids for a couple of days. And the idea is people want to see that you have an entrepreneurial attitude. If you want to stand tall in the applicant pool and not swim in the shallow end of that pool, you got to have something that makes you unique. What's going to make you unique? So you got to fill your toolbox with these kind of skills, these work readiness skills. If you do that, then that really allows you to do a portfolio. Portfolios used to be an arcane kind of thing. They're coming back now. But want to add you for your portfolio, all the things you do. It's a reference of critical documents, information, materials that you use to say that you have been accomplished and whatnot. And again, with respect to public speaking, I'm reminded, kids can join a professional organization. There's always the arm of a professional organization that will allow you to kind of submit an abstract and then preach, to lead speech for maybe 10 minutes. But that's critical. Same time, organizations, trade organizations are good because you find mentors there. Folks love to talk to kids, particularly mature folk who have been in the workforce. They love to get a chance to talk to these young folks, give them the benefit of their experience. We need to teach our kids to take advantage of that and build these networks. You got to build a database of people who know other people. We say that it's not what you know, but who you know, but it's who you know and what they know. Every job I've ever gotten, except for one, I got because I knew someone. And the job that I applied for, without knowing anyone, I was turned down. I was doing well until I told this gentleman who did not look like me that I had an MBA, great. Where are you getting it from? UDC? Oh, that's still a reality. So the young kids today come up differently in terms of having more diverse kind of relationship. But we see now that once that pie, that economic pie shrinks, we see what they're doing to our president. But you need to, that's a part of education. That's a part of education, educating our kids. But believe it or not, folks, I've taken the abbreviated version, and I'm going to close. And I'm going to leave you with this, and I'm going to read this. Today, more than ever, I believe the schoolhouse door remains a gateway to jobs and the American dream. And while a degree without skills is not the golden ticket to a job, I do believe a student with a degree is far better off than one without a degree. If your kids walk through that schoolhouse door fully committed, they will leave equipped to achieve their God-given potential. Not only will they move beyond the crisis, but as Tom Brokaw, celebrated news anchor and author, said in the commencement speech at Stanford University, they will also have a chance to be the masters of the universe, whose boundaries have yet to be determined. Thank you.